John A. Macdonald, what? This is him, the guy on screen. He was Canada's first prime minister, and he did a lot. So he kind of helped get the ball rolling on the process that led to Canada's creation, or Confederation as it's referred to. Um, he helped sign the first Canadian Constitution, and he was Canada's first prime minister under the Progressive Conservative Party, securing that party up until the 1990s. So he became prime minister in the 1860s, shortly after Canada was created. He did a lot. That's all I'll say. He served a very long time throughout the rest of the 1800s, apart from one point where his term was interrupted by the first Liberal Prime Minister of Canada. But he helped started the process to build the Canadian Supreme Court, the Canadian Railroad, purchased the Hudson Bay Company, and he also died in office. So, it would be incorrect for me to just leave the video here saying he did a lot. But, and there's always a but, he did a lot of horrible shit. Alright, I'm not gonna just be around the bush anymore. He was extremely racist. Now, at that point in history, the Victorian era, at least in the Western world, the leading ideology was that was this social Darwinism kind of construct where the theory was that the quotation marks superior races had to civilize the inferior races. Now, yeah, he was extremely racist. He ended up helping to create the residential school system, which is where the whole practice of it was that it would, in quotes here, civilize and westernize in the Canadian government's mind, civilize them for being uncivilized by Victorian era standards. What would happen was that the children would be taken away from their families forcefully. You didn't have a choice. They'd be taken there. Sometimes they would die there, and no one would be told about it. The families wouldn't be informed, and they just never see them again. They weren't allowed to use their own language. They were pretty much put to work, child labor. But don't worry, it's fine. We're doing it for a good cause. That was the idea. These things lasted for years. It's a major scar in Canadian history. It lasted from shortly after Canada's creation to the 1990s, where the final residential school closed down. And now Canadian politics seems to be in this cycle where it's brought up again via something like the unearthing of a mass grave, or some kind of serious issue for Indigenous tribes. And it seems like Canada's in this cycle where the Canadian government apologizes, says, "Oh my God, we're so sorry," but they don't do anything, or at least on most occasions, it seems like they do very little. And then we just move on, and it's like a clock starts again, waiting until that one moment where it will happen again. But getting back to Macdonald, yeah, he was incredibly instrumental in creating this system. Also, during the Canadian Railroad construction, he used a lot of Chinese laborers, which, of course, they were also racist towards them, using head tax that most Chinese people couldn't afford to pay. And this brings us to modern times where statues of him being taken down and all that stuff. But then there's the question of that always seems to come up with MacDonald is how do you remember him? Like what does he mean to Canada? That's the point. Because though he was incredibly formative to Canadian history, he's our first prime minister. He's like our own George Washington, something that he kind of reflected himself in his own time. But he committed acts that to this day still harm many in Canada and is a continuing contentious debate in all across this country. So it begs the question, how do you remember him? And I think it's a good example of the theory that we as people tend to put people in the category of good and bad. So we often ignore the gray area. And I think in my opinion, a better solution, and probably one that's more productive, is to remember him as yes, one of the founders of Canada, but also understand that he was incredibly racist and he did many horrible things. And I think if we can find that balance where we can still remember him without like venerating him as a complete good guy or a complete bad guy, with got that understanding, I think it can help work towards a greater understanding of Canadian history and a greater conversation on it that can help to heal some of these divisions that have stayed with Canada for hundreds of years. But then again, that's